KTRS.
750 here, Big 550 KTRS. He's Rodney Davis, Illinois Congressman. Stops by to say hi. Good morning, Congressman. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, McGraw. Thanks for having me.
You were in Cuba not too long ago.
I was in October.
Tell us about it.
You know what? I'd been there in 2005, and I'd always been somebody who thinks we ought to trade more with Cuba.
Right.
I think it's the only way to get rid of the Castros. I think that's where I agree with a lot of my friends who don't want to lift the embargo. We have the same goals to get rid of the communist government.
Right.
I just think what we've been doing the last 50-plus years hadn't been working.
So you're more in line with President Obama on this.
I am on this issue.
Mark the day in time. the argument, though, and it's a legitimate argument. Both sides have great points. Dan Lebitard, columnist for the Miami Herald, said he's our Hitler. And would you trade with Hitler?
Yeah, I think the Castros have shown that they are a very isolated country. They have isolated their people for 50-plus years. We're at the point where the Castros are almost at the end of their own lives.
Right.
And I think because the government can't sustain itself, they're almost at the end of their government, too. If we don't act now to make Cuba a trading partner as much as we can before the Castros fall, we lose that generation who remembers America and Cuba being each other's best partners.
You also have to think that if it falls into complete and utter chaos, ISIS is there, and there are other groups that can sort of take over where there's chaos and sort of create some other type of terrorist organization.
I think because of Cuba's isolation, that's very
much
less likely to happen.
Not necessarily ISIS itself, but another fractious group that is looking to create trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I look at Cuba as, because they've been so isolated, because they have not grown economically, they've been dependent upon Russia, Venezuela, that's gone by the wayside. They ought to be looking to America, but they're not, because the government's more fearful now. Even though we've opened up more trade, they're more fearful of losing power now, and I saw that in October versus going there in 2005.
What are your thoughts as you watch your party's presidential race?
I'm waiting for Ric Flair and Roddy Piper to pop out in the next debate.
It's turned into you started it. No, you started it. My wife's hotter than your wife.
It is not new for me to call this process a circus, and I think the debates were intentionally used to try and get people to insult each other. And I think that's a disservice to the presidential race.
But they were set up by the party, and they were set up by, many times, Fox News.
Oh, yeah, no. I'm not letting anybody shirk the blame for this whole debate process. But I believe the moderators wanted to see more of the insults come from Donald Trump because it had ratings. And unfortunately, we've forgotten that this is the most important position in the world. Well, this is the only person in the world who has the nuclear codes,
yes.
The fingerprints on.
Have you announced your support for one of them?
I supported Marco Rubio.
Okay.
Marco's out. I voted for Marco. I wish he would have won. I think he would have been a great president. I've said that I'll support the Republican nominee, whomever it is, over any of the Democrats.
So you would have no problem supporting Donald Trump?
Well, I didn't say I wouldn't have any problems. I just said I would support the Republican nominee over Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders just picked up 3 big wins this weekend.
Is there a bridge too far? In other words, is there something Donald Trump could say that you would say, I just cannot support him anymore?
I don't know what else he can say.
That's the question. I mean, you look at this and you say, each one calls him a sniveling liar and this and that. Would you support him? Yes, I would. At some point, don't you have to take a stand and say, I don't care anymore. It's this man does not represent our party.
Well, Lion McGraw Millhaven.
Yes, so there you go.
Exactly what we're going to start with. He was not my preferred candidate.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that if he is the Republican nominee, he immediately starts to pivot to be a presidential candidate and takes this a little more seriously. Because frankly, in the Republican primary, I don't think he or his organization has.
Right. There's no evidence of that. He seems to be getting worse.
No. And
he said over the weekend that he wants to sort of stop buying Saudi Arabian oil. The government doesn't buy Saudi Arabian oil. That's a free market decision. So he doesn't even have the basic understanding of how the system works.
And you wonder how he's in the lead.
Well, and you wonder why reasoned politicians like yourself wouldn't come out and say, this is unacceptable. This is a bridge too far.
Because we only have a choice between two candidates. And when the time comes, there will be a choice between either our Republican nominee and Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders.
Right.
And I will go with the Republican nominee over those two.
Let's say, hypothetically, even though I'll answer your question for you, you don't deal in hypotheticals, but if the Republican nominee were pro-choice, would you then support him that way, or her?
I have voted for Mark Kirk numerous times, and he is pro-choice.
Right. So there's not
Donald Trump was just recently pro-choice. I mean,
and he might be again. Who knows?
Phyllis Schlafly's, Googling all over him. I mean, this whole process is upside down.
So there's not a bridge too far. Whatever the party nominates, you will support.
Out of the candidates that are still left in this race, I will support the Republican nominee over Hillary Clinton, who, many Democrats are showing they don't want to support. Bernie Sanders is an avowed socialist and communist, so yes.
Who has very similar ideas to Ted Cruz. Very similar.
Bernie Sanders?
Oh, my goodness. Are you a free trader or are you an anti-free trader? Because both of them are anti-free trade.
Well, Ted was free trade before he was anti-free trade.
Okay,
remember on TPA he wrote an op-ed with Paul Ryan and then flipped and didn't even call Paul and tell him so.
But they're both against the big banks, the Wall Street bailouts, the free trade, all of those things. I mean,
Doesn't his wife work at Goldman Sachs?
Yes, but he's against the bankers. I'm not advocating one or the other. I'm just stating the facts, Congressman. Rodney Davis, always a pleasure. Illinois Congressman, what district? 13th District. A reasoned politician today, something that is a rarity. Congressman, always a pleasure. Thanks for popping in.
You too, buddy.
7:58 here, Big 550 KTRS.
Flooring takes more abuse than any product